Welcome to What the Health? Where anything health is fair game as we tackle the trends and bust the myths about health and wellness. Here are your hosts, Dr. Dan and Angela Toro.
And welcome to another episode of What the Health. I am Dr. Dan, here with my co-host,
Angela Toro with Toro Family Chiropractic. Got another good episode coming up today. Got to do my quick disclaimer. So we're here for informational purposes only, talking about health and wellness. In no way this is to be taken as individualized medical advice. Always talk to your trusted healthcare provider. So with that out of the way.
With that being said, what is our title today?
Today, something I love to talk about, which is BMI is bullshit.
Oh, there it is. Less than a minute into the podcast, and she already let the swear words slip.
That's all right. This one is, close and personal to me for, personal reasons, but then also as a health professional and as a personal trainer, it's just something that we see a lot and hear a lot, and it's just something that is such a good reminder to people, which is this idea of, we are so weight centric in this society, meaning we focus so much on that number on the scale. Starting from school. I mean, I remember, I don't know if they're still doing this, you would probably be able to speak to it better.
Charts,
yeah, do they still do the height and weight charts in school? I mean, I remember... Sure. I remember everybody getting sent down to the gym and weighed and height taken. And one, you're doing that in front of all of your classmates, yes. Which is if you were like me and on the, what would they say?
Larger
on the higher percentile was completely mortifying. And then, two, again, it's putting like all of this pressure around that stepping on the scale, and that there needs to be a certain correlation between your height and weight. And again, as far as kind of using that as a tool, especially for kids and growing and making sure that they're growing at an appropriate rate, I can see all of that and how it's important. But unfortunately, weight has become such a central focus for people, and people confuse weight with health. And that's where it really becomes a very dangerous mindset, especially when that becomes the driving force of somebody's decision to make changes to their lifestyle, because the number on the scale is going to change. It's going to change for a lot of reasons, even within a day. I mean, it's, depending on how hydrated you are, what you've eaten that day, how active you've been, that number can go up and down. And so people get so focused on it. And it's not that it can't be used as a single tool, but people really need to understand that weight is more a product of your lifestyle, more so than that should be the ultimate.
That's the number you're trying to achieve.
Yes, exactly.
So let's take a step back, because I know she's really excited. I got to rein her in here since my lovely wife and her sister-in-law is not here to do that. Let's talk about what is BMI for those people who don't know or maybe have heard of it and aren't necessarily aware. What is the measurement, and why is it used as a tool?
Yeah, so BMI is essentially a ratio of height and weight. So it looks at, again, basically that relationship between how tall you are and how much you weigh. And then the number, there's a formula. There's all kinds of things online. You can go in and plug in your height and weight, and it'll calculate your BMI for you. And I will say that there is a correlation to an extent between BMI and morbidity and mortality. So how sick you are, how likely your risk of having certain illnesses.
Yep.
But with that being said, again, there are other comorbidities going on with BMI that might be more of an underlying issue. Also, there are people that we know that are at a perfectly quote unquote normal BMI or normal weight that have all kinds of health issues going on. Yeah. So what you need to understand is BMI is simply a ratio of your height and weight. So with that being said, if you are of a higher weight, whether that's from more muscle, more fat, more bone. There is such a thing. There is, people with bigger frames, bigger. Yeah.
I'm big bone.
I'm big bone. I joke about that, but really we are. I mean, we have bigger frames. If you measure a good way to do it is if you measure your rib cage, I mean, you really can only whatever that circumference is, that's really as small as you're going to get. You're going to always have a little bit of cushion around that, but you can only get down so small based off of the size of your ribs, your hips. There is something to that underlying structure that you have. You can only get down so small, and you do need an appropriate amount of fat and muscle to help maintain those natural body functions. So when we start to look at BMI, and you look at BMI as a range, there's a range of healthy, and again, I'm not even going into the health, you can look all that up online as far as what is a normal or healthy range of BMI.
I think what is it, like 25 is considered obese, above 25?
Above 25 is overweight, above 30 is considered obese. It's like 18 to 25 is considered normal.
Yeah, and again, it has to do with your height in, I think it's kilograms divided by your height in meters.
It's kilograms squared, weight in kilograms squared divided by height in meters.
Yeah, and then go into any BMI calculation, just Google it.
And you can put it in pounds and inches too, and you do it online. So the calculation itself is easier to do in kilograms and meters if you're doing it by hand.
But what you're alluding to is that it's not just because, again, when you factor in weight, your overall weight, that number is not breaking down what that weight is made up of. So you're made up of water, you're made up of, muscle tissue, of bone tissue, of organ tissue, fat tissue, all of these different tissues and types of tissues in the body, your body is composed of. And so, just by taking a blanket, this is your weight, that has nothing to do with what the composition of your body is. And I think one of the easiest examples when you look at that is bodybuilders. I think every bodybuilder is probably considered morbidly obese.
Morbidly obese, yeah. According to BMI.
According to BMI only, because especially the heavyweight bodybuilders. Because again, if you look at their heights, they have so much mass associated compared to their height, but that has nothing to do with the breakdown. So you actually go then and start to look at the breakdown of muscle tissue or lean tissue versus fat tissue. Most of those guys are 2 to 4%, probably less than 2 to 4%.
Which I would argue. I'm not saying that bodybuilding is necessarily the ideal body composition either.
It is absolutely not.
Just disclaimer right there.
We're using this as an example because it's an extreme and it's easy to understand.
So you can have a bodybuilder that is the same weight as somebody who lives a very sedentary lifestyle, has very limited muscle mass, and is overly has too much fat composition.
Tissue.
Those two people will weigh the same exact amount, have the same BMI, but are they necessarily at the same risk as far as what we're looking at when we're talking about health? And what is their quality of life? Can the person, you're going to see much, different levels of activities of daily living, those are all the other things to look at as well. So yes, there's a huge, you brought up that body composition. There are different ways to look at your actual body composition. It's really cool, actually. There's a ton of research studies out there. I used to work in research. That's the easiest way to get those done. If you ever see a study come up where you would actually have the opportunity to have a body composition done, whether it's a DEXA or a bod pod, which are just different ways to measure your body composition, I would say definitely take advantage of it, because those are very expensive tests and they're not really offered clinically, unfortunately. Yep. So if you can kind of get in on a research study, whether it's as a participant or a control group, it's a great way to get some free information for yourself. Yes, I had the great opportunity of working in a lab that had access to all of that, so I got to utilize some of that when I was working in that lab, and it is really cool, and it gives you a very, very different picture of yourself and gives you a much better starting place of understanding where you are and what maybe your goals actually need to be, and what is a realistic weight goal for you, if that is something that you feel like you need to do. If you feel like you need to lose weight, but generally, when we talk about losing weight, what we really mean is we want to lose fat. We want to lose fat, or we want to tone up, or we want to gain muscle. Yes. So there's really, that body composition is so much more important And again, and not necessarily meaning from a, the way you look, but I think, again, having a healthy body composition is going to promote overall health and wellness. It's going to allow you to be active, and not just active, I'm not saying you got to be going out and running marathons or being a bodybuilder, but it's going to let you run around with the kids. It's going to let you get up and down steps without being winded or your joints hurting or, feeling like you need to immediately sit down.
Bend over entire shoes.
Seriously, but yeah, get in out of a chair. I mean, think about, as I'm listing these things, I'm sure somebody's coming to mind in your life. Hopefully it's not you, but it might be you, where, we all know somebody that struggles with those things, somebody that, it really is getting up and getting going in the morning is a whole process. And a lot of that is because of that body composition. So they probably don't have enough muscle mass to do the things that they need to do to support a healthy spine and healthy skeletal system. They might have too much fat that's, slowing them down and weighing them down and not providing any, actual help or health to their bodies. So,
well, and another thing that is very important to understand, so we already talked about the breakdown of the composition, and obviously if you have more muscle, more skeletal, and again, when you resistance training, see, that's a whole other topic we can get into, because I get this from especially like middle-aged and older women about the osteoporosis, and oh my goodness, we have to prevent that, but the best way to prevent osteoporosis is to actually have a strong frame and do resistance training. So as you build the skeletal muscle is the muscles that basically move your joints. As you build the skeletal muscle, it's going to pull on the bone through the fascial tissue and the tendons and actually stimulate bone growth, healthy bone turnover. So it'll break down old, weak bone, and it'll lay down new healthy bone. And that's actually interestingly why a lot of women and men who are overweight don't tend to have osteoporosis. At least it's less compared to, more frail bodies, because they are carrying around a heavier load.
They're getting resistance training.
Just by walking around, getting up and moving. So even though it may be limited, it's not as common to see someone who is overweight and have osteoporosis. Now, that is not an excuse to become overweight to prevent osteoporosis, but the point being, the type of training that you do is very important. But we already talked about the breakdown, where I was going with this is the breakdown of the composition of the body. But the other thing that you really have to look at is where the tissue is being laid down. And this is why if you look at study after study and research after research, men have a higher risk of heart disease and obesity-related illness because of where the fat distribution is versus women. And this is also very important for body image, right? Because women will always tend to have that pear shape where the fat is more around the belly and around the hips. Why? Because that's how we're genetically made, and that's where women were genetically created to carry their fat in terms of when they, especially child rearing.
Yeah, baby bearing hips.
The fat is typically carried around the belly. It's subcutaneous fat, okay, and that's the fat layer directly under the skin. Women, if there is excess fat tissue, will tend to carry it under the skin, around the belly, and around the hips. So the challenge with that is, from a body image perspective, it's much more visible, right? And so this is where women really struggle from that body image perspective, because that subcutaneous fat layer is much more visible. Whereas men, they could probably be, the same weight or similar weight, fluctuate maybe a couple pounds either way, but, they can continue to gain weight and not necessarily see it visibly, but because that fat tissue is starting to lay down, it's called visceral fat. It's the fat that's surrounding the organs. Very, very common around the heart, very common around the liver, especially, in men who, have a very high sugar carbohydrate intake. And so you have this excess fat around the organs. That is the more dangerous type of fat, because that's what really starts to compress the organs and really allow the dysfunction to set in, and what really allows that chronic illness. So that's where, from a BMI perspective, a lot of research shows that men who have a higher BMI have higher visceral fat, and it's because of that higher visceral fat composition that BMI tends to affect them more, just because of how they typically distribute. Whereas women who may have a higher BMI, it's not as directly correlating with a more diseased or a morbid lifestyle.
Yep, and that leads perfectly into something else that I was a different measurement that is a lot more, I think, usable and feasible, which is the waist to hip circumference, or waist to hip ratio, waist to hip circumference ratio. So it's exactly what it sounds like. Basically, you measure your waist, so kind of right around, right at the belly button, measure around. Measure your hips at the widest point, so get the biggest part of your booty there, and you're literally dividing that waist measurement by that hip measurement. And for men, it should be, generally you're going to see around 1, because again, men don't have the hip distribution, so around 1 is healthy. Anything over that, meaning that they have a much bigger gut belly than they do hips, is going to increase that risk of disease. Women should be about 0.8, because again, smaller waist, bigger hips, so you're going to have a smaller waist measurement, larger hips. And once you start to get a little bit higher than that, so again, once you start to get closer to that 1 ratio, or especially if you're over that 1 ratio, because women can get that, again, we were saying, generally you see that distribution, the pear-shaped, apple-shaped for women versus men, but women can absolutely start to get that visceral fat and carry that, so that's absolutely going to put them at the same risk as far as disease. So that's why I absolutely agree. Where you carry that fat is so much more important. And that's what you really want to pay attention to. So whether you're a man or woman, if you are carrying a lot of that extra weight right in the gut, right in the middle, kind of right in, and not just, I'm not talking about the women with the pooch. We all have the pooch. It's every woman's like, yeah, I know what that is. Some of the guys are probably, what the heck is she talking about? Every woman's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. That we're not talking about that. I'm talking about that kind of right around the belly button area. If that's where you're carrying your weight, because not only, like Dr. Dan said, is that putting more stress on the organs, but also with that, there's actually different types of fat, and the type of fat, that visceral fat, is also more mobile, which means you're at risk of it kind of going throughout the body. That's the fat that's going to then become more of an issue as far as clogging arteries, as far as affecting those organs and things like that, versus that subcutaneous fat that kind of lays down there and just hangs there. And yes, it's maybe not the most attractive, it's maybe doesn't make us feel good, but it's not really putting us at risk. It's not, it's not endangering our body in the same way that visceral fat is, that very mobile fat, that fat that's going to put a lot of strain on the organs.
On the organs, yeah. So. But it's also important to understand, and this was a generalized statistic that I learned even going back to undergrad, a long time ago. Yeah. But for every 1 pound of fat that you add to your body's composition, you actually add I forget how many miles of blood vessels it is. I think it's like 1 to 5 miles of blood vessels that you're adding for every pound of fat. I mean, it's a significant amount, because obviously that fat is a living tissue, just like bone, just like muscle, just like heart, just like liver. All of that living tissue is inside your system, and so it needs to have a vascular, it needs to have a blood supply. So as you add fat to the body, you start to gain, or you start to increase the amount of blood vessels that your body needs to feed that fat tissue. Well, increased vessels means you need more pressure to get the amount of blood throughout the body. Okay, so as you add fat to your system, you're adding an increased stress on the heart, and this is why that correlation of being higher BMI, even though again we don't like to use BMI, because you could have the bodybuilder versus the obese person, okay, or the truly overweight, high fat percentage person. when you have that, higher BMI and it's correlated with a high fat composition, your system does have to work harder, especially cardiovascular system, and that's where you can lead to things like high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, and even calcification, arteriosclerosis, because the increased demand on your system.
Yep. And that's where, again, looking at, using, if you want to track weight, if you want to track BMI, it's fine to use as a tool. It's just the idea is not to get stuck on that. Yep. So actually BMI in correlation with that waist to hip ratio, that is actually a very strong indicator of disease risk. So in fact, the waist to hip ratio, again, their studies have shown that someone who has a high waist to hip ratio, so meaning they have a bigger waist, even if they are a normal BMI, so within a normal quote unquote weight for their height, they are at increased risk compared to somebody who has a higher BMI, so quote unquote overweight, but with a lower or normal waist to hip ratio. So again, where the fat is very, very important. So if you have a high BMI, but that waist to hip ratio is okay, again, not to say that you're just, okay, don't worry about it, but that probably means, again, the weight distribution, you're not carrying as much of it in that dangerous midsection versus if you have a high BMI and that high waist to hip ratio, that's going to put you in the highest risk group because that means you have the excess weight and you're carrying it in an area that's going to be putting a big strain on the body, like Dr. Dan was explaining. So that's where, again, you can use it as a tool. But what you want to be careful of is getting so stuck on just BMI, but even worse than that is when people just get stuck on the weight. Because again, BMI at least takes into account the height to weight ratio. But what we unfortunately see is people just looking at that number on the scale, which doesn't even take into account, again, that difference in body composition, difference in height, difference in build. It's just looking at a number on the scale. And this is where, especially with women and men too, but you just see such unrealistic expectations of what that number is supposed to be. And I think with women, I don't know, you guys, I feel like are much more open about talking about your weight. Women, I've noticed, again, it was always kind of a taboo. You don't ask a woman how much she weighs. You don't ask her how old she is. You don't ask her how much she weighs. This
is the portion of the segment where Dr. Dan will close his mouth.
So, but it's true. Again, I noticed that growing up. I noticed that now. And what's really been interesting is, again, now I'm into a weight class sport. So I now have to think about that number on the scale, which is awful. But at the same time, it's been really interesting because it's something that it's shifted my mindset around it, because now it's having that open conversation. You walk into my gym, people are sitting there jumping on the scale in front of each other, asking each other, oh, what's your weight today? I'm like it's like, oh, how's the weather? what are you at today? Oh, I'm blah blah blah. Oh, cool. It's just such a common conversation, and not in any kind of judgmental way, but just in oh, hey, checking in. Where's your weight today?
Well, here's what's very important to understand too, is in terms of how much muscle. We've all heard the idea that a pound of muscle versus a pound of fat,
exactly,
and what that looks like from a volume perspective. Yes. You take a pound of muscle and it's literally like this. You look at the palm of your hand.
Well, everyone's had a 16-ounce steak before,
yeah, exactly.
Right?
I know I have. We're double. We're not going to get into that. That's a different episode. But anyway, take the palm of your hand. That's probably like a half pound to a pound, depending on the thickness, of muscle. But if you look at a pound of fat, it's like 2 or 3 times, up to 5 times the size of a pound of muscle. Fat is much less dense, which means it takes up more volume for the same amount of weight. And then the other thing that you have to factor in is now water, okay? I have seen the scale, and men, I think, tend to go up and down a little bit more than women with water weight, at least throughout the day. But I don't know if this is your experience, Angela, but I have seen the scale change 5 to 8 pounds in a single day.
Oh, easy, yeah.
from one time to another, depending on what I've eaten the day before, okay, especially the night before. If there's a lot of high carbohydrate intake, maybe some alcohol intake, beverage intake. Again, certain things which are more inflammatory, the body has protective mechanisms, there. So if you're taking in alcohol or you're taking in high, poor fatty foods or foods that are high in salt, your body very tightly regulates your salt content within the tissue and within the blood. And so if you take in a lot of salt, your body is going to hold on to a significant amount of water. So if you eat a very poor quality diet in one night, and this is where people wake up, in the middle of the night or the next morning, and it's like, oh, my joints, my hands feel swollen, my face looks puffy under my eyes, I've got puffiness under my eyes, and you just feel sluggish. You step out of bed and you've got like that, tingling or painful sensation on the soles of your feet. That's because your body has literally sucked in so much extra water, is holding on to so much extra water because of what you have just eaten. And now, if you were to fast, if you wake up and let's say you're at we'll just throw a number out there, 225 pounds, and you have just eaten, very poor quality diet the night before, and your body's hanging on to all that extra weight. If you were to fast that day and not eat or drink anything, and go to the end of the day, I can almost guarantee you will be down 3 to 5, if not more pounds, depending on your activity level, by the time you get to the end of that day. And so that's why I always joke, I don't want to discredit what a lot of people are doing when they start to transition, when they start to change their lifestyle, and that first, couple days or that first week, like, I'm down 5 pounds, I'm down 8 pounds. Congratulations, that means you're moving in the right direction, but I guarantee the majority of that is your water composition, the amount of water that your system is hanging onto, and water is very heavy. So just by virtue of your body being able to start to filter out some of that excess water, you will change 5 to 8 pounds, and you can do that inside of a day or two, depending on your activity level. So again, that's not discrediting what you're doing, but please be aware that those numbers can go up and down. And that's where people also they'll go on this weight loss diet, right? And they'll start to see these transitions, and then they've gotten a couple weeks in, and now they're going to have a little celebration. Maybe they have a wedding to go to, maybe they have someone's birthday party and they celebrate a little bit. They've been doing really good for a couple weeks, and now they have a cake, cookie, they have a beverage, and then, oh my God, the scale the next morning is 3 or 5 pounds heavier than what they were the day before. You're like, oh shoot. It's like, calm down. That's just your body hanging on to extra water. So, get back on track. And, I'm always amazed that you might plateau there for a day or two, but then it's like once the body re-regulates and gets rid of that, boom, you're right back to where you were, and, you can continue forward. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where getting so focused on the number of the scale can be really dangerous. And, I always talk to my clients about, yes, it's okay to have a goal weight, but what you want to do is not base it off of what society is telling you should be, or what I would say, or what a doctor is telling you should be, or what your friends are telling you. But what you need to do is focus on making those lifestyle changes. If you are eating the right things, if you are moving your body, if you are taking care of yourself, your weight is naturally going to come down to what is or come up, depending on if you're where you are. It's going to come to a natural weight range for you. And I say range because I try to look at my weight, and it's, plus or minus 5 pounds, depending on, and that's a 10-pound difference right there. So, and that's based off of, again, training volume, diet, even the climate. I mean, this time of year when it gets warmer, I swell. It's, and so. Same
thing. And when it's really humid outside, you wake up and your joints are really swollen. It's like, this sucks.
So, there's so many factors to it. So if you get so set on, I have clients that come in and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm up 2 pounds, and they feel like a failure. And it's like, well, 2 pounds, that could be from anything. So that's where you really have to kind of look at it as a range, because just like life, you're going to have those ups and downs. There is it's physically impossible to be at a weight and stay at that weight forever. It's going to fluctuate, some more than others, just kind of, again, depending on your body composition, depending on how easily your body holds onto water, depending on if you've ever been overweight or not. Yeah. If you have been overweight at some point and have lost weight, you will always put weight on more easily than somebody who has never been overweight.
You know why that is, right? What it has a lot to do with the number of fat cells. Because as you start to gain fat cells will start to divide. As the number of fat cells increases, then those fat cells have the ability to expand and contract.
Yes, you can shrink the size, you don't get the number.
You can, but that takes a lot more time.
Yes.
The immediacy of, usually in the first, to 20 to 30 days in the first month, and you're doing all of this, the number of fat cells are just, not the number, but the size of the fat cells are just shrinking. The number is not necessarily wearing down or breaking down. That's what takes months and years to reverse, and that's where again certain diets are really designed around helping to break down old damaged tissue, and fat cells are just like that. Your body, if it is into a certain fasting mode, and you switch out of carbohydrate burning to fat burning, and we've talked about this in other episodes, when you become fat adapted and your body knows how to burn it will always turn to the excess fat tissue first and foremost, because that's the stored energy. And when your body is trained and it knows how to get into that, it's very easy. I don't want to say very easy, but it is easier when your body is fat adapted to turn on those mechanisms and to turn towards to breaking that excess, not just size of cells, but number of cells down.
Yeah. So ultimately, again, I know we talked about a lot in this, but when it comes to your weight loss journey or health journey or whatever it is you're looking for, what I always like to talk to my clients about is, what is your ultimate goal? Like when you say you want to whenever someone says they want to lose weight or they say I want to be at this weight, my immediate follow-up question is why? How will your life look different being at X weight versus the weight you are currently? No. And then that's where, by answering that question, I want to fit in my old clothes, or I want to feel better in my clothes, or I want to be able to run around with my grandkids, or I want to be able to do the X, Y, or Z fitness thing. So all of a sudden now we're getting into what the actual goal is, because the weight, again, is a product of it. So, okay, if you want to look better in your clothes, then we're talking about trying to lose fat, build muscle, and tone up. Yeah. That's what you want. Again, number on the scale might not change. I can get you looking better in your clothes, and you might even put on a pound or two, depending on where you are. I can get you looking better in your clothes if that's your goal. I can get you more fit. I can get you more energy without ever looking at the number on the scale. And
so we talked a lot about fat composition. Body composition today. Is there a specific style of training? Because I know this is the question people are going to ask. What can I do, or what is a specific style of training or exercise that I can do to target that fat composition, and build the muscle, versus, because I know there's myths out there about what the best to do is. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about body composition, tone, and losing that fat, you want to look at resistance training. And you want to look at, in my opinion, functional resistance training. So I'm not talking about bodybuilders stand in front of the mirror and, okay, you're going to do the right bicep curl. Okay, now I'm doing the left bicep curl. No, that is a very specific physique-based style of lifting. I am talking about functional stuff. So you are moving your whole body, using body weight, maybe using resistance bands, maybe using some free weights, but that's the kind of training that I do myself, that I do with my clients, and I have extreme success with it because, again, it's going to utilize a lot of muscle. It's going to engage the fascia as well. It's going to engage that whole musculoskeletal system. So again, it's getting the body working together as opposed to just sitting there and focusing on one muscle group. It's getting the body working the way that it's supposed to, in a very functional way, very dynamic way. You're going to build muscle that's going to help break down that fat. It's going to get you stronger, more agile, more mobile. It's ultimately going to get the results that you want, no matter what your goal is.
Well, and again, it's very important to help people understand. We talked about this in another episode, so we don't have to get too far into this. But I look at flexibility, endurance, cardiovasculature, and resistance, strength as a 3-tiered step to overall fitness. And it's important to hit all three. But when you're really targeting, especially in our society, and people are overweight, targeting that resistance training, because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I'll hit the treadmill or I'll hit the elliptical. Here's what happens: you are only burning calories when you are actively engaged in that in that activity, the cardiovascular activity. What research has shown is when you engage in a resistance training and you actually start to physically break down the musculature, now you're in what's called active recovery, right? So now the musculature has been broken down. You basically, you have literally torn some of the muscles. This is why you're sore the next day or two, delayed onset muscle soreness. That is a very good sign, because that means your body is not just burning calories during the activity, but it's burning calories for the next 24 to 48 hours. And where are those calories coming from? Very much from the glycogen, which is the excess sugar stores in the muscles and liver. But once that's actually burned up, then it's going to turn towards the fat stores. So when you are actively engaging in resistance training, you are releasing FFAs, free fatty acids, into the bloodstream to be recycled into the liver and be gotten rid of the excess that your body is holding on to.
And circling back to that, because you brought up the glycogen again, which then circling back to, so when you burn glycogen, that's also going to help with getting rid of that water weight, because glycogen, without going too much into it, glycogen also stores water. So that's where, again, sometimes that first 3 to 5 pounds you're burning through some of that excess glycogen, you're burning through that excess water. And again, that's not, so you maybe haven't burned fat yet, but you're still going to notice that. You're going to feel the difference of that. I'm telling you, your pants will fit better. You'll see that decrease in puffiness in the face and the...
Which is also why when you sit down at Thanksgiving dinner, you need the stretchy pants, because as you're eating, it's like, whoop, you're going the other way. You're having it all.
So whenever people say, that's the other thing too, people are like, oh, well, that's just water weight. Like, yeah, but if that's 5 pounds of water, weight that I'm not walking around with, then I feel much better. So I'm still not discrediting it. Yes, I realize that 5 pounds will come back very quickly if I don't continue with the lifestyle, but again, it's not discrediting it. It's just, again, it's recognizing that there's a lot of different ways our body holds on to weight. We talk about all the time. We see the toxic lifestyles, the increased inflammation. So if I have clients that come in and just by cleaning up a couple things with their diet or their lifestyle or their supplements, 5-10 pounds come. We had the one client, he was the same weight forever, could not break it. We went through his diet, ate pretty clean, but he was a snacker, and it was quote unquote healthy. Again, that's a whole other thing. Healthy snacks, but it was still snacks. It was prepackaged, processed food, and I was like, here's your challenge. 1 week, cut out the snacks. Don't change anything else. Just cut out the snacks. Next time he came for his adjustment, he's down 8 pounds. 8 pounds.
He's like, in 1 week.
He's like, what? I'm like, told you. So that was, again, was it 8 pounds of fat? No, that was 8 pounds of inflammation and probably a combination, water weight, maybe a little bit of fat that his body was holding on to because of that, toxic component that he was putting into his body on a regular basis. So that's where it's very, very complex. Weight itself is so complex. That's why body composition is so important. How you feel is so important. I always ask people about, energy level and how they're feeling, how your clothes are fitting. We do all kinds of body measurements because it's not just that one number. It ultimately, I truly believe, focus on the lifestyle. The number will fall where it falls. If you are healthy and you are happy with where you are, then that's a healthy weight for you. Yeah. And I am a firm believer in that. So. All
right. So with that being said, BMI is bullshit.
BMI is bullshit. It can be a tool, but
it's not the end all be all.
Yes. So I'm not telling you don't step on your scale, but don't let that number control you. Don't let it ruin your day. Use it as a guide for it will tell you when you're generally doing the right things and generally doing the wrong things. So let it guide you, not control you. That's
there you go. So if this or anything that we talked about today resonated with you, feel free to reach out on our website, check out some of our other podcasts. And if you are in the southwestern Pennsylvania area and you want to come and meet with us in person, we'd love to guide you or a friend or a family member to better health and well-being. Or if you're not in the area, we are certainly able to help you find someone who has a similar philosophy that we do, and ultimately help you reach your health goals and helping you get healthy and stay healthy for a lifetime. So with that being said, I am Dr. Dan.
I'm Angela.
With another What the Health episode. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, guys. See you next time.
You've been listening to What the Health with Dr. Dan and Angela Toro, brought to you by Toro Family Chiropractic. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.whatthehealth.world.